guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be doing another reading wrap-up video. These are all books from my last TBR video, not this last TBR video, but the one like before it, and then a couple wrap-ups of this TBR that I recently did. And I just feel like I have enough books to share with you guys. I don't feel like I have to stay on like this certain schedule, but yes, some of these books are from my recent TBR. So let's go ahead and just jump into it. We don't need like this massive intro or anything, but the first book that I read since the last TBR video was Daughter of the Moon Goddess. So this was in 2 TBRs ago, and I was so excited to read this book. I just thought it sounded so interesting, and I haven't really read a lot of like Chinese like mythology or anything like that, and so it was just something that I was really interested in trying out, and I loved this. I gave this book 4 stars. I loved just the imagery that she had created, like just the mental pictures and the mental imagery that I was seeing in my mind were so beautiful. I even made a Pinterest board with a whole bunch of like pins and stuff of like the types of like imagery that I got when I was reading this. Like if you love books that are just set in like a really beautiful place, like this is definitely the one for you. And she also has just beautiful writing style as well. It definitely does have a YA feel. It is a YA book, so it does have a little bit of that YA feel. And another thing that it does have in it is a love triangle, sort of. And I am not somebody that reads a lot of love triangles, and I haven't read a lot of love triangles in the past. They just have never really been in the books that I've picked up. And so I kind of feel like this is one of the first love triangles that I've actually read, other than maybe like A Court of Thorns and Roses, which I don't even know if that's considered a love triangle. I mean, I guess kind of it is. But this had a love triangle in it, and it was like the first one that I have ever really read, I feel like, which is crazy because I've read a lot of romances, but it was an interesting experience. So one thing that I can say about love triangles that I kind of liked in this is if you love romance, then you're definitely going to get a lot of romance in the books, because not only are they having romance with one character, but they're also having a romance with another character, sort of. So if you really love romance in your books, love triangles are definitely, I feel like, kind of a fun way to go, and this has that in it. I gave this book 4 stars. I thought it was great. I was really excited to read the second one, which I'm reading right now, and this is actually a duology. So I personally really love duologies. I think they're great because I have a really hard time like committing to like really long series, and so if you're kind of like me in that regard, then you might really like this as well. So basically what this book is about is the daughter of the moon goddess, essentially, which is the title of the book. So it's basically about this woman who gets basically imprisoned on the moon to be the moon goddess because she does something bad, and so her punishment is to be the moon goddess, but she can't leave the moon. Well, she ends up having a daughter, and nobody knows that she had this daughter, so she's kind of trying to keep her a secret because she has like magic powers and things like that. But so the emperor and the empress, the celestial emperor and empress, they discover that this daughter exists, and so she has to flee the moon, and in that process she kind of has to like create a life for herself, but what she really wants to do is save her mom from being imprisoned on the moon, essentially. So really good. I gave it 4 stars, highly recommend. So this is the next book that I read. It's called Bending the Universe, and this is a poetry collection, and I actually found this at my local Goodwill, but I was flipping through the poems and I read a few of them and they interested me. Like, I was very interested in this poetry collection. It felt a little bit different than some of the modern poetry that I've read. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna give this a try. It was only $3.99 and I was like, let's do it. So I picked it up, and I have to say, I'm pretty picky about my poetry, like I've said in the past, but this was actually pretty fun to read. Now, this is by Justin Welch, and the thing that I liked about this book particularly is he talked about a lot of unique subjects. Like, he really had a wide array of topics that he wanted to write poetry about, which I really appreciated. I love poetry about all different types of things. I'm personally not a huge love poem fan. I don't know why, but love poetry just bores me to tears for some reason. Like, he does have a section here that is dedicated to love poems and like relationships, and I just don't like it, and I kind of skimmed those ones, but all of the other topics that he chose to write about were really interesting, and I feel like he did a really good job with this poetry collection. I could tell that he spent a lot of time on each poem. Like, each poem was very well constructed, and he was really taking the time to write unique poems, which, thank you, because I'm so tired of reading poetry collections where the poems don't feel very unique, or they don't feel like the person who wrote them spent a lot of time on each one. They just like whip them out really fast and it's just like sounds like any other poem. This definitely didn't have that. Each poem was very, very well done. And the interesting thing about this poetry collection is it kind of sounds a little bit like rap. Like I feel like you could rap some of these poems and it would work really, really well. So that was a little bit interesting, but as you can tell, I marked a lot of the poems that I really liked, and there's quite a few tabs in here. So I'm gonna actually keep this poetry collection around and maybe revisit it in the future. So the next book that I picked up was a book that I read in Hawaii, and as you guys know, I was really debating like what book do I want to read in Hawaii, because I'm always really picky about what books I choose to read on vacation. And this is the one I picked. It was You Were There Too, and this was in my TBR 2 TBRs ago. And this book was about dreams, and that's what really, really excited me about this book, because I love dreams. The weird thing about it is though is I don't like dreams in books. So I don't know what I was thinking, because usually I hate dreams in books. But this wasn't really like that. It was like the topic was dreams, right? So this is basically about this woman, and she's married, she's in a relationship and everything, and she actually has had dreams about this one particular person, this guy, her entire life. Like, she's always had dreams of this one particular guy, but this guy is very specific to like, they have kind of a romance in her dream world. And one day she ends up seeing this guy in her town, and he's visiting from like another town over. And she's like, oh my god, that's the guy from my dreams, like what the heck? And then she finds out that this guy is actually having dreams about her, and they kind of start forming this bond because they're like, what the heck, this is so weird, like why are we dreaming about each other? And they're trying to figure out how they know each other, like had they met in the past, like why are we dreaming about each other? And it was a very interesting book, and one thing that I can say about this book is it was so unique and it was creative, and I really liked the direction that the author took this book in. It's definitely kind of Colleen Hoover-ish in a way. So you know how Colleen Hoover doesn't necessarily write like 100% healthy relationships, right? She definitely likes to write about relationships and their hardships, how couples can get through really hard times. Like, she doesn't write perfect, happy marriages and relationships all the time. But like, that's kind of how this felt. Like, this couple in this book is not like a healthy couple. They're not like a couple that has no issues at all. And they're really trying to work through some really, really hard times that they're having in their marriage at the time that she like meets this guy who she's been dreaming about. And it's a really, really interesting like route that this book takes, and it's really cool to kind of see how this couple works through some of their issues, and it's really interesting to see kind of why, you know, these two people are dreaming about each other. And I think at the end it was just a really cool way to kind of wrap everything up, and I really, really liked this. I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was a really good book. It kind of has like a literary fiction mixed with like romance. I don't really know. It's not even really a romance, I would say, which I thought it was going to be a romance, but it's not really a romance. It's a good book though. It's really hard to explain, but I would highly recommend it. If you kind of like the drama of Colleen Hoover, or you kind of like that realistic type of vibe that Colleen Hoover books tend to have, then I would definitely pick this up. Even though this is not realistic, it's more of like a magical realism type of thing. It still has realistic vibes within relationships. Not every relationship is perfect. Relationships go through hardships. How do we work through these hardships and get, you know, to the other side and things like that. So I love this. I highly recommend it if you're kind of in the mood for a book like that. Like I said, I give it 5 stars. So the next book I read was The Night Swim by Megan Golden, and this book I was really excited to read because I heard so many amazing things about it. So many people said like you have to read it, it's so good. And they said to listen to it on audio because the audiobook is really good because it has like a podcast theme to it. So in the audiobook, it's like you're kind of listening to a podcast sometimes. And one thing I'm starting to realize that I don't actually really like in books that much, and it's not a genre that I love, is heavy crime mysteries. I like thrillers, especially like psychological thrillers, and they can have crime in them as well. But there's like this certain type of like mystery crime novel that I just don't really like, and it's kind of when it leans more to the crime side, because I always find that the twist or the reveal isn't really always all that interesting to me. I mean, it can be, but I usually feel like there's all these characters that are like, you know, introduced to you throughout the novel, and there's so many characters because the author wants you to like not really be too sure like who did it, right? So they're, you know, introducing a whole bunch of characters on purpose so you don't know who it's going to be, and then at the end you learn which one of the characters that you've been introduced to did it. And I always feel like the reveal is kind of like a letdown, because it's like, well, I knew it was going to be one of these people. You know what I mean? It was just a matter of when it was going to be revealed. And I just always feel a little bit let down by it. And this one definitely had that quality. Like, I felt really let down by it. I was just kind of like, okay, like, cool. I'm just not that big of a crime person. And there was a lot of like courtroom stuff in here and things like that. One thing that I can say though is this does have a lot of really good topics of discussion. So there's a lot of topics about rape and who to believe, and you know, why we tend to either blame the victim or we don't believe the victim, things like that, and how if the rapist is somebody of high stature in society, how we don't want to believe them because we don't want to ruin their lives. And I thought that was a really interesting thing as well. So this book has a lot of interesting topics to be discussed, and I really appreciated it for that reason. It's just, as far as like entertainment value, it just wasn't very high for me on entertainment value. So I ended up giving this 3 stars. I could probably give it like a high 3. It wasn't like the worst book ever. If you really like crime novels, then you might really, really like this. If you're not a big crime person, I probably wouldn't recommend it. It's just a book that I probably could have just skipped and been fine skipping. So that is my thoughts on that one. So the next book I read was a book that I was super excited to read, and it was Psycho by Robert Bloch. And this is a book that I knew nothing about, which I know is crazy because it's a movie. It's like a really famous story that pretty much everybody knows. You've either seen the, like, I don't know how many movies have been made, like 3? I think there's been like 2 or 3 made from this book. And I just didn't know about it. And I was so mad because Travis kind of spoiled it for me. I was sitting in the hot tub with him and I'm like, oh, I'm reading Psycho. And I'm like, did you ever watch that movie when you were little? He's like, oh yeah, isn't that the one where... And then he like gave me like this huge like twist type of thing at the end. And I'm like, did you just ruin the story for me? And he's like, maybe, I don't know. He's like, I'm sorry. So he kind of spoiled it for me and I was really pissed. But it was still good. Like, I like this. You can definitely tell it's written in the past. Like, you know how... Okay, like, you know when you watch movies from like the 80s or the 70s or 60s or even like 50s, they talk differently, like their dialogue is different, and I think it's slang probably from the time. That's kind of how this feels. It definitely has like that, the vocabulary of that time period, if that makes sense. So when I was reading it, I could just tell that it was like written from that time, if that makes sense. And I also feel like topics like this were much more probably taboo back then. Like, I feel like in our times now, there isn't a lot of things that can really shock us. We're very, very knowledgeable and much more aware of psychological disorders, and you know, the internet is at our fingertips. We can learn anything that we want to learn. And I feel like nowadays things are just far less taboo. People know so much more about so many different things. And I could see that this book was probably very surprising and very taboo and very like, oh my god, like what the heck, back in those times. But reading it now, it's not quite as shocking. Like, I've read much more shocking books, but I could see how it was like that then. Does that make sense? So I thought it was really good. I think though that, you know, the topics that are discussed in here probably were discussed in the best way because of the time in which it was published. Like, if this book was published now, I could see how some people might think it's problematic. But I think, like I said, it's just because of the times. But it was a really good book. If you like thrilling books, if you like shorter books that don't have a lot of filler, this is a great one because it is such a short read and it's a thriller, so there's a lot going on. And in that regard, it was really good because it really kept me on my toes and it kept me interested. So I gave this book 4 stars. I thought it was great. Now I kind of want to watch one of the movies because I just want to see kind of like how they made it into a movie. So the next book that I read was Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. Oh my gosh, I love Abby Jimenez. She's definitely one of my new favorite authors. Like, I just really think that she knows how to write romance. There's something about her characters that are so endearing. And this one, I wanted to give 5 stars so bad. Like, there was so much about this novel that was 5-star worthy. The first thing being was the main love interest, Jacob. Oh my gosh, I loved him so much. And the thing that Abby Jimenez did fantastically with this character specifically was she gave him anxiety, and she gave him like social anxiety, but it was done better than any other anxiety that I've ever seen done in a book. And I feel like a lot of authors do give characters anxiety, but it's never done as well as I feel like this character was. I think what she did right with this character specifically is she focused more on the thoughts that he was having in his head versus the physical feelings he was feeling through his anxiety. And I feel like when authors focus more on the physical aspects of anxiety, like sweating or shallow breathing or having a hard time breathing or sweaty palms, you know, like the physical aspects, I don't relate. Like, I'm just like, okay, like I get that they're kind of like feeling anxious. But what she did right was she focused on the thoughts. So she would really focus on the things that Jacob was thinking in his head. Like, oh my gosh, they're gonna think I'm so stupid. Like, I can't believe I said that. Like, can I be any more awkward? Like, now she's gonna like think that I'm a weirdo. And he just came across as so realistic. Like, I don't know if Abby Jimenez has social anxiety or if she talked to somebody that has social anxiety, but she really knew how to like write a character that really struggles with anxiety. She did it phenomenally, and because of that I wanted to give her 5 stars. And he was such an endearing character. Like, he was so sweet. Oh my gosh, he was the sweetest character. He loved plants and he just wanted to stay home in his little house, and he was just the greatest character. I loved him so much. He's one of my favorite, like, not love interests, I would say. I mean, he is a great love interest, but I think he's just one of my favorite characters, like as a whole, right? So I loved him, and Bree was amazing in the first book as kind of like the wing woman, but she was amazing as a main character as well. I just really, really liked her. The only thing that bugged me about this book, and the only reason I gave it 4 stars, was because there was a lot of miscommunication in this book, especially near the end. And Bree, as much as I love Bree as a character, she really started to get on my nerves by the end. Like, not only was the miscommunication bad, but I feel like the assumptions were bad. Like, you know when a character just makes a really random assumption and bases all of her decisions on that one assumption that isn't even true? They just make an assumption. Like, in this book, she's like, he doesn't even want to be with me. He still loves his ex-girlfriend. Because she saw them, like, talking or something at a party, right? She saw them talking, she made an assumption that he still loved her and wanted to be with her. So the whole book, that's what she assumes. That's what makes her act the way she acts and makes her make the decisions that she makes, because she thinks that he still loves his ex-girlfriend. And you're just like, oh my god. And you're just like, if you just asked, then maybe clear it up. Like, that's the only thing that irritated me, and it did get pretty bad by the end. I was just like, oh my god, shut up. But it wasn't so bad that I hated it. Like I said, I gave this book like 4.5 stars. Like, it was still manageable. Like, if that's gonna turn you off, don't let it turn you off. It was still a really, really good book. Really realistic characters. I cared a lot about the characters. It was an amazing book, and don't let the miscommunication turn you away, because it was still great. And Abby Jimenez is, I think, one of my new favorite like romance writers. Like, I loved it so much, so highly recommend. So the next book I read was Follow Me to the Ground by Sue Rainsford. So this was a really interesting book. I think I gave this book 3 stars. 3 stars. So this book was really weird. Like, really weird. Like, if you like weird, kind of like speculative fiction, if you liked Wilder Girls, which I didn't like Wilder Girls, but if you liked it, you'll probably like this. There's like some body horror in this. It's kind of dark. It's like, there's some dark subject matter in here, I think. And it's definitely one of those books where you kind of have to interpret it on your own to kind of like really like vibe with it, I guess. Like, they don't tell you straight out what these characters are thinking and doing and all that kind of thing. You kind of have to like interpret it on your own, which normally I don't like books like that, but for some reason this one was really, really interesting. Like, the way that she told this story and some of the topics that she was kind of experimenting with and playing around with, I think she did something really creative with it, but it was a weird book. It was just a writing style you have to get kind of used to, but it's basically about this girl who is not human. She was basically born from the ground. Like, her dad is like this witchy type of guy, and he put all this stuff together, buried her, and she grew in the ground, and they had this power of healing. So they can basically like open people up and use their magic to like heal people, and then they just like close them up, and then they put them in the ground to like stir for a little while, and then after a few days they take them out of the ground and they're healed. It's weird, I don't know. And so that's their job, right? But she has this one boyfriend, like this guy that she's like kind of dating, and he's kind of like not the best guy really, but she loves him. And so she wants to cure him basically of his badness, or what people are saying is like the badness within him, I guess. And so she buries him in the ground to like heal him. It's a really interesting book, but I could see how people wouldn't like this. I could see how people could really, really, really like this, and I could see how people would hate this. It really kind of depends on what type of literature you like. But if you like kind of dark, weird magical realism that's kind of like maybe Wilder Girls mixed with Ava Lavender. Do you guys remember Ava Lavender, that book? It kind of has like a weird Coraline vibe, but for like adults. Like think Coraline, but for adults. So like a little darker, a little creepier, a little... I don't know. I can't even explain it, but I feel like it's just a weird book. But it's kind of cool at the same time. Like it's one of those books you just don't really know how to feel when you read it. And I kind of liked it. I really did. But like I also kind of was like meh about it. I don't know. So the last book that I read was The Last Word by Taylor Adams. I listened to this on audio, and this is his newest book. He's the author of No Exit, which you guys know I love that book. I gave it 5 stars. Now this book was interesting because when I was reading it, I wasn't sure how much I was liking it. I was like, is this like a 3-star read? Like, oh my gosh. But by the end, I was like, okay, that was like a 5-star read. So during the process of reading, I wasn't really too sure, but the way that Taylor Adams writes, it's very like he likes to push like the twists forward more and more and more. Like you always think, oh, the story's almost over. Like it's almost over. It's wrapping up. But then he'll push it one more level. And then you're like, okay, like it's almost over. And then he'll push it again. And then you're like, okay, it's almost over now. And then he'll push it again. Like he just keeps pushing it farther and farther. And you keep like... there's a twist, and then there's something else happens, and there's another twist, and then something else happens. That's just really what he's good at, because I remember feeling that way with No Exit as well. And I think that some people might be like, okay, enough, like this is so unrealistic, like bad things keep happening, but it's what made the story really interesting, if I'm being honest. So this book is basically about a girl who is living by herself, like on this cliff, and she has like this neighbor that lives really, really far away, and they kind of like communicate via telescope because they're both like reclusive. And so they have these whiteboards, and they like play hangman on these whiteboards with their telescopes, and she's just a recluse. And one day she reads this really bad horror novel, and she gives it a 1-star review, and this author starts stalking her and wants to kill her basically. And that's kind of the story. And this book, at first, like it felt very repetitive. Like there are scenes where like things keep happening over and over and over and over and over, and it's just kind of like this chase cat and mouse game, and it kind of feels like it's going to be like that, but it's not. Like it's just a portion of the book, and then a whole bunch of other stuff kind of happens. So if you're kind of reading this and you're feeling that same way, just know that like it's not the entire book, it's just that one part that feels maybe a little bit drawn out at times. But other than that, like I thought it was fantastic. If you like Intensity by Dean Koontz, which is a pretty popular book by Dean Koontz, and I read that probably like 5 years ago maybe, then you're gonna like this because it's very similar vibes. It's dark, it's creepy, it's scary, it's thrilling. It's very, like, it keeps you on your toes, which he's really, really good at, and I really, really liked it. In fact, the word that I should be using is suspenseful. He's a very good suspense writer, which I feel like is a hard thing to do. A lot of writers are thrillers or mystery thrillers, psychological thrillers, but he's like a suspense thriller writer. And it's rare to read suspense thriller writers. Like Dean Koontz Intensity is like a suspense thriller. So really, really awesome if you want a book that is just like really intense. You know what I mean? So I really like this. Like I said, I gave it 5 stars. I probably could have given it like 4.5, but I just gave him a 5 because I thought it was good enough for a 5 for sure. So highly recommend it. I thought it was really, really good. So that is it, you guys, for this wrap-up video. I am still reading some of my TBR from my last TBR video. I am in the middle of The Daughter of the Moon Goddess book 2, like I said, and then I have like 3 other books that I need to read for this TBR. I don't know if I'm going to get to them, to be honest. This book that I'm currently reading is taking me a really long time to read for whatever reason, and May is literally the busiest month of my life. Like May is busier for me than like Christmas time. So we had Travis's birthday the first Tuesday of the month. Then we had Emery's birthday the second Tuesday of the month. So I had to plan like 2 birthdays for her because she needs to have her birthday party, and then she needs to have her regular birthday day, and then she has to have her birthday party at school. And then we have Mother's Day, and then we have my birthday party the 3rd Tuesday in May. And I just feel like I'm constantly in celebration mode for the first half of May. It's like all I am doing is planning birthday parties and celebrations and stuff like that. So it's been a crazy, crazy, crazy month. I should have known that kind of coming into this month, that I'm probably not going to read as much, but like you guys care. I don't think you care. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I have a couple videos planned for later this month. Let me know if there's anything specific that you guys want to see from me on this channel as far as like book related content, and I think that's it. So I will see you in my next video.